She stood in her
It's
own
over,
kitchen,
Mr. Mitchell.
7 months
Agent
pregnant,
Carter.
watching her husband's
Everything you
mistress
see here is
drink
now
coffee
evidence.
from her favorite mug. Madison smiled at her with the confidence of a woman who had already won. Derek did not even look up from his phone. They called her weak. They called her pathetic. They said she was too stupid to fight back and too broken to matter. What they did not know, what they would discover far too late, was that Rachel Carter had never been a helpless housewife. She was a federal prosecutor.
He said he wasn't
And for
there.
3 years, she had been building a case
need a recess
that would
now,
send her
Judge.
husband to prison for 34 years.
Here you go.
But
fresh
before
off the
Rachel
griddle.
could destroy Derek Mitchell,
Oh, they look
she had to survive
Thank you.
3 moments that nearly destroyed her first. 3 times when she lost everything. 3 times when she wanted to give up. 3 times when the monster she married tried to take her baby. This is not just a story about revenge. This is a story about a woman who was told she had no power and proved the entire world wrong. Stay until the end, because the final twist will change everything you think you know about strength. The lesson. Before we begin, remember this truth that Rachel learned the hardest way possible. Silence is not surrender. Patience is not weakness. And the most dangerous person in the room is never the one making the most noise. It is the one who is quietly gathering evidence, building alliances, and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. This story will teach you that you do not need to be loud to be powerful. You do not need to fight back immediately to win. Sometimes, the greatest victories come to those who endure, who document, who plan, and who refuse to break no matter how hard the world tries to crush them. If you have ever felt powerless, if you have ever been told you are not strong enough, or smart enough, or brave enough to fight back, this story is for you. Now let us begin. The meaning. Rachel Carter's story carries a message that every woman, every person who has ever felt trapped needs to hear. You are not weak because you choose peace. You are not broken because you stay quiet. You are not defeated because you have not fought back yet. Sometimes strength looks like patience. Sometimes power looks like documentation. Sometimes victory looks like outlasting the people who tried to destroy you. Rachel did not win because she was louder than Derek. She won because she was smarter. She won because she built alliances when she could not fight alone. She won because she refused to become the monster she was fighting against. And most importantly, she won because she understood that real victory is not just about saving yourself. It is about becoming someone who can save others. The champagne glass slipped from Madison's perfectly manicured fingers, shattering against the imported Italian marble floor as FBI agents in dark tactical gear swarmed through the penthouse door like a wave of justice that had been building for 3 long years. Madison Wells, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, money laundering, and witness tampering. The lead agent's voice echoed through the luxury apartment, bouncing off the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the glittering Manhattan skyline. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. 2 officers flanked her immediately, snapping cold metal handcuffs around her slender wrists while she stood there in her designer dress, her mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled from water. She screamed at Derek, her voice cracking with a panic that stripped away every layer of sophistication she had carefully cultivated. You said she was just a housewife. You said she had nothing. You said she was too stupid to figure anything out. You said she was too weak to fight back. But Derek Mitchell could not answer her desperate questions. He was already face down on his imported Persian rug, the same rug that cost more than most people's annual salary, his own hands cuffed behind his back, his cheek pressed against the intricate patterns as he watched, helpless and humiliated, While his pregnant wife approached the supervising agent, Rachel reached into her purse with one hand, the other resting protectively on her 7-month pregnant belly, and pulled out a leather credential case. She flipped it open with the practiced ease of someone who had done it 1,000 times before. Special Assistant United States Attorney Rachel Carter, she said, her voice steady and clear. Department of Justice, Financial Crimes Division. I have been building this case for 3 years, and I am here to ensure proper chain of custody for all evidence seized today. The supervising agent nodded respectfully. We have everything on your list, counselor. The safe, the computers, the offshore account documentation. It is all here. Rachel turned to look at her husband, still pinned to the floor, still processing the magnitude of his miscalculation. Actually, she said, allowing herself a small smile, I was never a housewife. I was never the weak, helpless woman you thought you married. I was the prosecutor building your case for 3 years, and sweetheart, you just handed me everything I needed. Derek's face contorted with rage and disbelief. This is not possible. You are lying. This is some kind of trick. Rachel crouched down, her pregnant belly making the movement awkward but not impossible, until her face was level with his. The only trick, she said softly, was making you believe I was too weak to fight back. That was the trick, and you fell for it completely. But Rachel's victory, as sweet as it tasted in that moment, had come at a price no woman should ever have to pay. Before she stood over the ashes of her husband's empire, before she watched the FBI cart away boxes of evidence that would put him in prison for decades, she had to survive 3 moments that nearly destroyed her completely. 3 peaks of absolute despair, 3 times when the man she married tried to take everything from her, including the baby growing inside her. 3 times when she thought all hope was lost. This is the story of how a woman they called weak became the most dangerous person in the room. Not with her fists, but with her mind. Not with violence, but with patience. Not with revenge, but with justice. To understand how Rachel Carter ended up standing over the broken remains of her husband's criminal empire, we need to go back 3 years. Back to a cramped conference room in the Department of Justice. Back to the moment she made the most dangerous decision of her career. She decided to marry the enemy. And in doing so, she discovered that the most powerful weapon a woman possesses is not her anger. It is her patience. 3 years before the FBI raid, Rachel Carter sat in a windowless conference room on the 7th floor of the Department of Justice building in Washington, D.C. The room smelled like stale coffee and desperation. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in that particular shade of institutional pallor that made even healthy people look slightly ill. The walls were covered with photographs, financial documents, corporate records, and red string connecting them all like a spider's web of corruption that had taken years to weave and would take even longer to unravel. At the center of the web was a single photograph, Derek Mitchell, 35 years old, real estate developer, philanthropist, darling of the Manhattan social scene, and according to everything they had gathered, the operator of the largest money laundering network on the East Coast. Rachel studied that photograph for the 100th time. He was handsome in that carefully cultivated way that wealthy men often perfected. Perfect teeth that had cost thousands in cosmetic dentistry. An expensive haircut that probably required a standing weekly appointment at some exclusive salon. A smile that promised the world while hiding everything rotten underneath. She had seen that smile before, on the faces of every white-collar criminal she had ever prosecuted. The smile of a man who believed he was untouchable. At 31 years old, Rachel had already put away 47 white-collar criminals. She had graduated top of her class at Columbia Law School, beating out candidates from families with generations of legal legacy. She had made grown men cry on the witness stand and had frozen the assets of cartel leaders who thought their money made them invincible. She was very, very good at her job. But Derek Mitchell was different. Director William Thompson stood at the head of the conference table, his gray hair and tired eyes reflecting years of chasing ghosts who always seemed to slip through the cracks. He was 62 years old, 3 years from mandatory retirement, and Derek Mitchell had become his white whale. "We have tried everything," Thompson said, his voice heavy with frustration as he gestured at the wall of evidence. "3 prosecutors have attempted to build a case against Mitchell. 3 times we have gotten close. 3 times the case has collapsed." He picked up a file from the table and dropped it with a thud. Evidence disappears from secure facilities. Witnesses who were ready to testify suddenly recant their statements or leave the country. Sources who are providing valuable intelligence go silent overnight. Rachel leaned forward in her chair. How is he doing it? He does not strike me as the type to get his own hands dirty. Thompson shook his head. He has someone inside. Maybe multiple someones. We do not know who. We do not know how deep it goes. But every time we get close, Mitchell knows before we can move. It is like he can see us coming from miles away. Rachel stood up and walked to the wall, examining the web of connections more closely. Bank accounts in the Cayman Islands, shell companies in Delaware, real estate transactions that made no economic sense unless you understood they were designed to clean dirty money. "What if we did not come at him from the outside?" she said slowly, an idea forming in her mind. "What if we stopped trying to breach his walls and instead got someone inside them?" Thompson frowned. "What do you mean? What if someone got close to him? Really close? Close enough that he would never suspect? Close enough to see everything from the inside?" The room went quiet. Rachel could feel the weight of what she was suggesting settling over everyone present. She could see the calculations happening behind Thompson's eyes. "You are talking about deep undercover," Thompson said slowly, his voice dropping. "That is not how we operate. That is FBI territory, and even they would not approve something this extreme for a white-collar case." Rachel turned to face him directly. "The FBI has tried. Mitchell's people identified their agents within weeks. He knows what law enforcement looks like. He has sources inside multiple agencies who tip him off whenever someone new shows interest." She walked back to the table and placed both hands flat on its surface. "But he does not know what I look like. He does not know my face. He does not know my voice. He has no idea that I even exist." Thompson stared at her, like she had suggested setting the building on fire. "You want to marry a suspect?" Rachel shrugged, keeping her voice casual even as her heart raced with the audacity of what she was proposing. "It is a long-term investment, the ultimate undercover operation. I become his wife. I gain access to everything: his home, his office, his computers, his phone. I see everyone he meets, hear every conversation he has." She paused, allowing a small smile. "Besides, have you seen his Netflix queue? The man watches true crime documentaries religiously. He is practically begging to get caught. He just needs someone close enough to gather the evidence." "That is not how undercover operations work," Thompson said. "It is now," Rachel replied, "unless you have a better idea, unless you want to spend the next 3 years watching more evidence disappear and more witnesses flee the country." Thompson was silent for a long moment. Rachel watched him weigh the risks against the potential rewards. She watched him consider his legacy, his career, his 3 remaining years before retirement. "This cannot be official," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "If it goes wrong, the department will disavow any knowledge. You'll be completely on your own. No backup, no extraction team, no safety net." Rachel nodded. She had expected nothing less. I understand. And if he discovers what you are doing, Thompson continued, his eyes meeting hers with genuine concern, he will not just destroy your career. Men like Mitchell, men with his connections, they have ways of making problems disappear permanently. Rachel thought about the victims, the people whose retirement savings had vanished into Mitchell's shell companies, the small business owners who had been destroyed by his fraudulent schemes, the families who had lost everything because one man believed he was above the law. I understand the risks, she said. I am willing to take them. Thompson closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, Rachel saw something that surprised her: respect. Then God help us both, he said. Operation Silent Partner is authorized, off the books, completely unofficial, and completely your responsibility if it fails. Rachel nodded and turned back to the photograph of Derek Mitchell. She had 6 weeks to create a new identity, 6 weeks to become the kind of woman a man like Derek Mitchell would want to marry, 6 weeks to prepare for the most dangerous performance of her life. She had no idea that the hardest part would not be fooling Derek Mitchell. It would be not losing herself in the process. 6 weeks later, Rachel accidentally bumped into Derek Mitchell at a charity gala for the Metropolitan Museum of Art. She had spent those 6 weeks transforming herself. New wardrobe, carefully selected to be expensive enough to catch his attention, but not so expensive that she seemed like competition. New hairstyle, softer and more feminine than the severe ponytail she usually wore. New mannerisms, practiced in front of mirrors until they felt natural. She had studied Derek Mitchell like he was a final exam, his preferences, his patterns, his past relationships. She knew he liked women who were intelligent enough to hold a conversation, but not intelligent enough to challenge him. She knew he preferred blondes, but had dated brunettes when they offered something else he wanted. She knew he had a weakness for women who seemed slightly damaged, like they needed saving. Rachel could play damaged. She could play anything. The gala was held in the museum's Temple of Dender wing, the ancient Egyptian temple, providing a backdrop of timeless power for the modern power brokers mingling beneath it. Champagne flowed freely. Conversations buzzed about art and money and the intersection of the two. Rachel was working as a volunteer, serving drinks to guests who barely looked at her. It was the perfect cover. Wealthy people rarely noticed the help. They certainly never suspected the help of being federal prosecutors. She spotted Derek across the room, holding court with a group of investors. He was wearing a custom-tailored tuxedo that probably cost more than her monthly rent. His smile was bright and practiced as he shook hands and made promises he had no intention of keeping. Rachel picked up a tray of champagne flutes and began making her way toward him. She timed her approach carefully, waiting until he turned to greet someone new, waiting until his attention was divided. Then she bumped into him, hard enough to spill champagne on his jacket, soft enough to seem genuinely accidental. "Oh my God," she gasped, her face flushing with perfectly performed embarrassment. "I am so sorry. I am so incredibly sorry. Please let me help you clean that up." Derek looked down at the champagne spreading across his lapel, then up at the woman who had spilled it. Rachel watched his eyes move across her face, her body, assessing and calculating. She saw the moment he decided she was worth his time. "Do not worry about it," he said, his voice warm and reassuring. "These things happen. Accidents are part of life." "No, please," Rachel insisted, dabbing at his jacket with a napkin. "This is so embarrassing. I am usually not this clumsy. It is my first event, and I am so nervous, and now I have ruined your beautiful jacket. Please, let me pay for the dry cleaning at least." Derek laughed, and Rachel noted that it was a practiced laugh, designed to put people at ease. "Really, it is fine. I have a dozen jackets just like this one. Still, Rachel said, looking up at him with eyes that she hoped conveyed both apology and attraction. I feel terrible. At least let me get you a fresh glass of champagne. Tell you what, Derek said, and Rachel could hear the hook setting in his voice. Instead of champagne, why do you not let me buy you a cup of coffee sometime? That way you can make it up to me properly. Rachel bit her lip, pretending to consider an offer she had engineered from the start. I would like that, she said softly. I would like that very much. Derek smiled, pulling out his phone. I am Derek, by the way. Derek Mitchell. Rachel shook his extended hand, noting the firm grip, the manicured nails, the Rolex watch that cost more than most people's cars. Rachel, she replied. Rachel Carter. She had no way of knowing that those two words, her own name, would become both her greatest weapon and her heaviest burden over the next 3 years. The courtship proceeded exactly as Rachel had planned. Over the following 6 months, she became everything Derek Mitchell wanted. She laughed at his jokes, even the ones that were not funny. She admired his business acumen, even when she saw through his schemes. She asked innocent questions that made him want to brag about his accomplishments, never knowing that every word he said was being cataloged and analyzed. Every night, after Derek dropped her off at the modest apartment that was part of her cover identity, Rachel would sit at her kitchen table and write everything down in a journal, hidden inside a hollowed-out copy of Eat, Pray, Love. She had chosen that book deliberately. Derek had made his disdain for what he called women's self-help nonsense very clear. He would never pick it up. He would never find what was hidden inside. 3 months into their relationship, Derek took Rachel to meet his mother. Victoria Mitchell was everything Rachel had expected, and worse. Old money wrapped in new prejudices. A woman who had spent her entire life believing that wealth equaled worth, and that anyone without it was simply less than human. The lunch was held at a country club, so exclusive it did not even have a name on the door. Victoria spent 2 hours interrogating Rachel about her family, her education, her career prospects. Rachel played her part perfectly, modest but not pathetic, ambitious but not threatening. She let Victoria believe she was exactly what she appeared to be, a middle-class girl who had gotten lucky enough to catch a wealthy man's attention. By the time dessert arrived, Victoria had made her judgment clear. She thinks I am not good enough for you, Rachel said to Derek, as they drove away from the club. Derek shrugged. My mother thinks no one is good enough for me. Do not take it personally. But Rachel filed that information away. Victoria Mitchell would be a problem. The question was when, not if. 6 months after that first champagne spill, Derek proposed. He did it at sunset on the rooftop of his penthouse, with the Manhattan skyline glittering behind them like a promise of all the wealth and power he could offer. Rachel, he said, dropping to one knee and opening a velvet box containing a diamond so large it was almost vulgar. You are the most amazing woman I have ever met. You make me want to be a better man. Will you marry me? Rachel felt tears spring to her eyes. Real tears, though not for the reason Derek assumed. She was about to marry a monster. She was about to become the wife of a man who had destroyed countless lives with his greed and corruption. She was about to sacrifice years of her life to bring him down. Yes, she whispered, her voice trembling with emotions that Derek completely misread. Yes, I will marry you. Derek slid the ring onto her finger, and Rachel felt its weight, like a shackle. But she smiled, she kissed him, she played the role of the ecstatic bride-to-be, because she was Rachel Carter. She was a federal prosecutor, and she was going to destroy Derek Mitchell from the inside, no matter how long it took. The wedding was 3 months later. 400 guests, a 12-tier cake, enough flowers to fill a botanical garden. Rachel walked down the aisle in a designer gown that cost more than her actual yearly salary. smiling at the man who thought he had won the ultimate trophy wife. Derek had no idea that his blushing bride had spent the previous night photographing documents from his home office. He had no idea that the woman he was promising to love and cherish was already building the case that would send him to prison. And he had no idea that somewhere, in the next 2 years, something would go terribly wrong with Rachel's carefully constructed plan. She would fall in love. Not with Derek. She saw through him more clearly with each passing day, but with the idea of the life she was pretending to have, with the fantasy of normalcy, with the dream of being someone other than a prosecutor whose entire existence revolved around other people's crimes. And worst of all, she would get pregnant. And that would change everything. Victoria Mitchell had suspicious eyes from the very first moment Rachel entered her son's life. At 62 years old, Victoria was the embodiment of generational wealth and its accompanying sense of entitlement. She sat on the boards of 3 charitable organizations, not because she cared about their causes, but because it gave her access to the right social circles. She lunched at the country club every Tuesday with women who had last names that appeared on buildings and street signs throughout Manhattan, and she had spent 30 years ensuring that her son's path to success remained unobstructed by consequences, morality, or the law. Something is wrong with that girl, Victoria told her personal attorney over lunch at Le Bernardin, just 3 days after Derek announced his engagement. She is too perfect, too agreeable. She never argues, never pushes back, never demands anything. Real women have opinions. Real women have family drama. Real women have histories. This one just smiles and nods like a trained performer. The attorney, a man named Harrison Wells, who had been handling the Mitchell family's legal matters for 2 decades, raised an eyebrow. "What are you suggesting?" "I am suggesting," Victoria said, dabbing her lips with a linen napkin that cost more than most people's dinner, "that I want to know everything about Rachel Carter. Where she came from, where she went to school, who her friends are, what skeletons are hiding in her closet." She paused, her eyes cold and calculating. "Because everyone has skeletons, Harrison, and I intend to find hers." Victoria hired a private investigator that same afternoon. Not just any investigator, but the best in the business. A former CIA operative named Thomas Brennan, who charged $5,000 a day and was worth every penny. Brennan was thorough. He dug into Rachel's background with the precision of a surgeon and the tenacity of a bloodhound. He traced her employment history, her educational records, her family connections, her financial transactions. Rachel's cover was excellent. It had been built by professionals at the Department of Justice who knew exactly how to create a past that could withstand scrutiny. Every detail was documented. Every reference was prepared. Every gap in the timeline was filled with plausible explanations. But Brennan found something, not much. Just a hairline crack in the carefully constructed facade. 2 years of Rachel's employment history did not quite add up. The nonprofit organization she claimed to have worked for during that period existed, but the records of her employment were slightly too perfect, too complete, like they had been manufactured rather than accumulated naturally over time. And there was one reference who hesitated just a second too long when asked about Rachel's performance. Just one moment of uncertainty in an otherwise flawless interview. It was not proof. It was not even evidence. It was just a feeling. But Victoria Mitchell had built her entire life on trusting her feelings about people. And her feelings about Rachel Carter were screaming that something was very, very wrong. Rather than confront Rachel directly, Victoria began a systematic campaign to undermine her. She was too smart to make accusations she could not prove, too experienced to tip her hand before she had all the cards. Instead, she worked quietly, methodically, like a spider building a web around an unsuspecting fly. First, she isolated Rachel from potential allies. Every time Rachel tried to form a friendship with one of Derek's business associates' wives, Victoria would find a way to sabotage it. A whispered rumor here, a conveniently timed invitation that excluded Rachel there, small cuts that added up over time. Second, she documented everything Rachel did, every purchase she made, every person she spoke to, every time she left the penthouse and where she went. Victoria's investigators maintained a file that grew thicker by the month. And third, most importantly, she began introducing better options to Derek. Options like Madison Wells. Madison was 29 years old, blonde, beautiful, and absolutely ruthless in her pursuit of wealth and status. She came from old money that had run out 2 generations ago, leaving her with expensive tastes and no way to afford them except through strategic relationships with wealthy men. She had dated Derek briefly before Rachel appeared on the scene. Their relationship had been passionate but volatile, ending when Madison pushed too hard for commitment and Derek pushed back. What Madison did not know was that Victoria had orchestrated their original breakup. At the time, Victoria had deemed Madison too aggressive, too obvious in her gold digging, too likely to cause scandals that would reflect poorly on the Mitchell family name. But now, with suspicions about Rachel growing, Victoria decided that aggressive might be exactly what they needed. The reintroduction happened at a business conference in Chicago. Victoria made sure Madison was seated at Derek's table during the keynote dinner. She made sure Rachel was stuck at home with a conveniently timed stomach bug, courtesy of something Victoria's housekeeper had slipped into her morning tea. By the time Rachel recovered from her mysterious illness, Derek was already texting someone new. The messages were innocent enough at first. Business discussions, meeting logistics, the kind of communication that could easily be explained away. But Rachel knew better. She had spent her career reading between the lines of seemingly innocent communications. She recognized the undertone of flirtation, the subtle escalation from professional to personal. She filed the information away and continued with her mission, but Victoria was not done, not even close. Rachel first met Madison in person at one of Victoria's infamous Sunday dinners 4 months into her pregnancy. The dining room of Victoria's Upper East Side mansion was all crystal chandeliers and antique silver, filled with Derek's business associates and their perfectly preserved wives. The kind of women who had personal trainers and nutritionists and spent more on their annual Botox budget than most families spent on groceries. Rachel wore a modest maternity dress that accommodated her growing belly. She had gained 15 pounds already, and while her doctor assured her it was perfectly healthy, she felt enormous and ungainly compared to the sleek society women surrounding her. Madison arrived late, wearing a red dress that left little to the imagination, her entrance calculated for maximum impact. Every head in the room turned to watch her walk in. Rachel saw Derek's eyes light up in a way they had not lit up for her in months. "Everyone," Derek said, rising from his chair to greet Madison. "This is Madison Wells. She is consulting on the Riverside project. She will be joining us for dinner." He guided Madison to the empty seat directly across from Rachel, his hand lingering on her lower back just a moment too long. Rachel watched them exchange a look that lasted half a second, but communicated volumes. She had seen that look before. In the eyes of cheating husbands, she had deposed. In the moments before wives discovered betrayals that would destroy their families. The dinner proceeded with the usual small talk about stock prices and real estate values, and which private schools were worth the obscene tuition fees. Rachel contributed when asked, smiled when expected, and pretended not to notice that her husband could not stop looking at the woman across the table. Then Victoria decided to draw first blood. "Did everyone know?" Victoria announced, her voice cutting through the conversation like a knife through silk. "That our Rachel here used to work at a little nonprofit? How charming that Derek was able to rescue her from that dreary existence." A few polite laughs circled the table. Rachel felt her cheeks flush, but kept her smile firmly in place. "It was actually a wonderful organization," Rachel said, calmly. "We provided legal aid to families who could not afford representation. Very rewarding work." Victoria's smile did not reach her eyes. "I am sure it was, dear, though I imagine it must be quite an adjustment, going from poverty wages to all of this." She gestured around the opulent dining room as if to emphasize exactly how far above her station Rachel had climbed. Rachel opened her mouth to respond, but Madison beat her to it. "Oh, how clumsy of me," Madison exclaimed, her hand shooting out and knocking over her wine glass. The red liquid splashed across the table and onto Rachel's dress, spreading like a bloodstain across the cream-colored fabric. "I am so sorry," Madison said, her voice dripping with false concern. "But honestly, it is probably for the best. Horizontal stripes are not really flattering when you are showing." The room went silent. Everyone stared at Rachel's wine-soaked dress, at her pregnant belly, at the humiliation painted across her face. "Stay calm," Rachel told herself. "Stay in character. You are almost there. Do not blow 3 years of work because of one spiteful woman." "It is fine," Rachel said, forcing her voice to remain steady. "These things happen. If you will excuse me, I will just go clean up." She pushed back from the table and walked out of the dining room, feeling every eye on her back. She made it to the bathroom, closed the door, and allowed herself exactly 30 seconds to feel the full weight of her humiliation. Then she straightened her spine, cleaned what she could of the stain, and prepared to return to the battlefield. When she walked back into the dining room, Derek was showing Madison something on his phone. They were laughing together, their heads close, their body language intimate. Rachel saw what was on the screen and felt her blood turn to ice. It was a photograph from her and Derek's honeymoon in Italy, the two of them standing in front of the Colosseum, smiling like they did not have a care in the world. But it was not the original photograph. Someone had photoshopped text around Rachel's face. The words were small, but Rachel's trained eyes caught them immediately. "Federal informant. Under investigation." Victoria leaned across the table, her smile sharp as broken glass. "Sweetheart," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the room, "is there something you would like to tell us? Because my investigator found the most interesting things about your past." The room went completely silent. Every eye turned to Rachel. She could see them all reassessing her, wondering what secrets she might be hiding, wondering if everything they knew about her was a lie. Derek's face shifted from confusion to suspicion to cold, calculating assessment. For the first time since they met, he looked at her like she was a problem to be solved rather than a wife to be loved. Rachel's hand went instinctively to her belly, where her daughter was kicking. Her baby, her mission, 3 years of work. Everything she had built and sacrificed was about to collapse in this dining room full of criminals and their enablers. She had maybe 30 seconds to save both her cover and her child. So Rachel did the only thing she could do. She laughed. "Oh, Victoria," she said, letting relief flood her voice, like she had just understood a joke that had initially gone over her head. "Your investigator found my sister's file, did they not? Rebecca? She is the one who testified in a federal case 5 years ago. Poor thing had to go into witness protection for a while. It was a whole family trauma. I do not usually talk about it because it is still so painful." She pulled out her phone and navigated to a photo album she had prepared for exactly this scenario. Pictures of a woman who looked enough like her to be a sister, a cousin she had paid to pose for the photographs, insurance against exactly this kind of attack. I suppose I should have mentioned it, Rachel continued, showing the photos to anyone who cared to look. But honestly, it is such a difficult subject. Our family does not discuss Rebecca anymore. The whole situation nearly destroyed my parents. She looked directly at Victoria, allowing a hint of steel to show through her wounded expression. I am sorry if my family's tragedy has caused any confusion. I can assure you I am exactly who I have always claimed to be. Derek's shoulders relaxed visibly. Victoria's eyes narrowed, but she had nothing concrete to counter Rachel's explanation. Madison looked disappointed, like a cat whose mouse had escaped at the last moment. The rest of the dinner passed in awkward silence. Rachel smiled and nodded, and pretended that everything was fine while her heart hammered against her ribs. She had survived. Barely. But she knew the clock was now ticking faster than ever before. That night, after Derek fell asleep beside her, Rachel crept to her hidden journal and added a new section, Emergency Protocol. She wrote for 3 hours, documenting escape routes, backup contacts, and evidence that could protect her child if something happened to her. She made copies of everything and stored them in locations Derek and Victoria would never think to look. She had learned something crucial from the domestic violence survivors she had helped prosecute cases for, back when she was still a prosecutor rather than an undercover wife. Always have a go bag packed and ready. Always have money hidden somewhere they do not know about. Always have at least one person who knows where you are and what you are doing. Rachel started preparing for war while everyone around her still thought she was surrendering. She had no idea how soon she would need every single one of those preparations. 3 months after the disastrous dinner party, Rachel was 6 months pregnant and watching her marriage crumble in slow motion. Derek had changed. Not in obvious ways at first. Small things. A late meeting here. A business trip there. His eyes sliding past Rachel. When she entered a room, like she was furniture that had lost its appeal and was now waiting to be replaced. Then the phone calls started. The ones he took in another room with the door closed. The ones that made him laugh in a way he never laughed with her anymore. The ones that ended abruptly when Rachel walked in, followed by 2 casual explanations about investors and contracts and nothing you need to worry about, honey. Rachel knew exactly what those calls meant. She had seen the same pattern in dozens of cases. The secretive smiles, the sudden increase in personal grooming, the gym membership that appeared out of nowhere, and the cologne that smelled different from what he usually wore. Her husband was having an affair. As a prosecutor, this information was potentially useful. Affairs created vulnerabilities. Mistresses could become witnesses. Pillow talk could reveal incriminating details. As a woman, as a pregnant wife, it hurt more than Rachel had expected. She had known from the beginning that Derek Mitchell was not a good man. She had married him specifically because he was a criminal, because she needed access to his operation, because she was willing to sacrifice years of her life to bring him down. But somewhere along the way, despite everything she knew about him, some small part of her had started to believe in the fantasy, the beautiful penthouse, the lavish lifestyle, the promise that she could have both her mission and a normal life. That fantasy was dying now, killed by late-night phone calls and lingering perfume on her husband's collar. The first concrete evidence came from the laundry. Rachel was sorting through Derek's suits, checking pockets before sending them to the dry cleaner. When her fingers closed around a folded piece of paper, it was a receipt from La Maison Blanche. $4,200 for dinner for 2. Rachel stared at that number for a long time. She and Derek had not been to La Maison Blanche in over a year. He had claimed it was too pretentious, too crowded, not worth the hassle of reservations. Apparently, it was worth the hassle for someone else. Rachel did the math that every betrayed wife does, whether she wants to or not. $4,200 for dinner. $4,200 to feed the woman sleeping with her husband. $4,200 that should have been spent on their family, on their baby, on the life they were supposed to be building together. She was a federal prosecutor who had frozen the assets of cartel leaders. She had brought down Ponzi schemes worth billions. She had made grown men weep on the witness stand, and her husband was cheating on her with restaurant receipts in his pocket like an amateur. "Derek," she whispered to herself, folding the receipt carefully and sliding it into her own pocket, "I was going to send you to prison for 30 years. Now I am going to enjoy it." Her training kicked in with renewed focus. The personal betrayal had crystallized something that had become fuzzy around the edges. She was not Derek Mitchell's wife. She was his prosecutor, and prosecutors did not let emotions cloud their judgment. She installed additional monitoring software on the home network, piggybacking on the security system Derek himself had installed. She cloned his backup phone, the one he thought she did not know about, during a convenient software update. She activated the GPS tracker in his car that the dealership had installed as a theft deterrent. Within 2 weeks, she had a complete picture of her husband's affair. 847 text messages with Madison Wells over the past 8 weeks. Messages that started professional and became increasingly explicit. $78,000 transferred from Derek's personal account to Madison's over the same period, labeled as consulting fees, but bearing no connection to any actual consulting work. Hotel receipts, jewelry purchases, a lease on an apartment in Soho that Rachel was quite certain Madison was not paying for herself, and photographs. So many photographs. Rachel forced herself to look at every single one because evidence was evidence, no matter how much it hurt to see her husband's hands on another woman's body. But the worst discovery came from a conversation Rachel overheard by accident. She woke at 3 a.m. to use the bathroom, a frequent necessity in her 6th month of pregnancy. On her way back to bed, she heard Derek's voice coming from his home office. He was on the phone. Speaking quietly but not quietly enough, Rachel pressed her ear to the office door and listened. "The baby changes the timeline, that is all," Derek was saying. "After Rachel gives birth, we wait 6 months for the custody arrangement to settle. Let her bond with the kid, get attached, start thinking she has some stability. Then I file for divorce, citing her mental health issues." A pause while the person on the other end responded. Rachel recognized Madison's voice, tinny through the speakerphone, but unmistakable. "And the prenup?" Madison asked. "I thought you said the prenup protected you." Derek laughed, and the sound made Rachel's skin crawl. "The prenup is worthless if I can prove she was mentally unstable during the marriage. I have already talked to a psychiatrist who owes me some favors. He will testify that she showed signs of severe postpartum depression, paranoid delusions, maybe even a break from reality. Victoria knows people who can make those records appear very convincing." Rachel's hand went to her mouth, stifling the gasp that threatened to escape. "What about her getting custody?" Madison's voice asked. "I do not want some other woman's brat around when we are together." "She will not get custody," Derek assured her. "By the time I am done building the case against her, no judge in this state will let her anywhere near that baby unsupervised. She will be lucky if she gets twice monthly visits with a social worker present." "And what about the money?" Madison pressed. "The whole point of this is that I do not want to be your mistress forever. I want to be your wife." Derek's voice dropped lower, but Rachel could still hear every word. "You will be. Once Rachel is out of the picture, once I have full custody and control of all the assets, There is nothing stopping us. I am thinking destination wedding, maybe the Maldives. Rachel slid down the wall, outside the office, her hands pressed against her belly where her daughter was kicking. She had spent 3 years building a case against Derek Mitchell, the criminal. She had documented his money laundering, his tax evasion, his fraud, but she had never seen Derek Mitchell the monster, the man who was planning to manufacture mental health records to steal custody of his own child, the man who was going to destroy his wife's reputation, her career, her life, just so he could marry his mistress without the inconvenience of a fair divorce settlement. And now that monster was coming for her baby. The confrontation happened 1 week later. Rachel had spent 7 days gathering herself, planning her approach, trying to find the best way forward. Should she reveal her true identity? Should she contact her handlers and extract immediately? Should she try to salvage the mission or prioritize protecting her child? In the end, she decided to give Derek one chance, one opportunity to prove that he was not the monster she had heard plotting against her in the dark. I know what is happening, she said, finding him in his home office on a Sunday afternoon. Her voice was steady, despite the fear coursing through her veins. I know about Madison. I know about the apartment in Soho. I know about the $78,000. Derek looked up from his laptop, his expression shifting through surprise, calculation, and finally settling on something cold and dismissive. You have been going through my things, he said. That is a violation of my privacy. I am your wife, Rachel responded. I think I have a right to know if my husband is having an affair. Derek closed his laptop and leaned back in his chair, studying her like she was a mildly interesting puzzle he had already solved. So, what do you want, Rachel? A confession? An apology? You want me to get on my knees and beg your forgiveness? I want you to choose, Rachel's voice cracked, despite her best efforts to control it. Her or us, her or your family. Her or the child growing inside me right now. Derek was silent for a long moment. Rachel saw something flicker across his face. For one desperate second, she thought it might be remorse. Then he laughed, not a small chuckle. A full, cruel laugh that echoed off the walls of his office and shattered whatever small hope Rachel had been holding on to. Choose, he repeated, still laughing. Rachel, you do not get to give me ultimatums. You do not have that power. Look at yourself. He stood up and walked toward her, his eyes raking over her pregnant body with unconcealed disgust. You are 6 months pregnant. You are getting fat and tired, and you cry at commercials. You have no job, no income, no money that is not mine. Your family is a joke. You have no friends who are not people I introduced you to. He stopped inches from her face, close enough that she could smell his cologne. The same cologne that used to make her feel safe and now made her want to vomit. Where exactly are you going to go, Rachel? What exactly are you going to do? Leave me? Please. You would be on the street in a week. I am your wife, Rachel whispered, hating how small her voice sounded. I am the mother of your child. Derek shrugged, and the casual cruelty of the gesture hurt more than anything he had said. You are a wife, he corrected. Not the only option I have. Madison understands me. Madison supports my ambitions. Instead of questioning everything I do, Madison is going to give me what you never could. And what is that? Derek smiled. And it was the coldest expression Rachel had ever seen on a human face. Loyalty. He walked past her toward the door, pausing just long enough to deliver one final blow. You want to know why I married you, Rachel? Because you were easy. You did not ask questions. You did not demand anything. You just smiled and nodded and existed in my space without causing problems. And for a while, that was exactly what I wanted. He opened the door and turned back to look at her. But now I want more, and you are not capable of giving me more. So I would suggest you start thinking about what your life is going to look like once I am done with you. Because I promise you, Rachel, it is not going to be pretty. He left, closing the door behind him, with a soft click that sounded like a gunshot in the silent room. Rachel stood there for a long time, one hand on her belly, the other pressed against her mouth to hold back the sobs that threatened to tear her apart. She had known Derek Mitchell was a criminal. She had known he was capable of terrible things, but she had not known he was capable of this. That night, lying alone in the dark while Derek slept in the guest room, Rachel made a decision. She was done playing defense, done gathering evidence, and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Done being the victim in a story that she had never agreed to participate in. She had spent 3 years building a case against Derek Mitchell's criminal empire. Now she was going to use every single piece of it. But first, she had to survive what was coming next. And what was coming next would be worse than anything she could have imagined. 7 days after the confrontation in Derek's office, Rachel learned just how far her husband was willing to go to destroy her. She was in the kitchen, making herself a cup of herbal tea and trying to ignore the constant ache in her lower back that came with being 7 months pregnant. The penthouse was quiet. Derek had left early for what he claimed was a business meeting. Then the front door opened. Rachel heard voices, Derek's, and a woman's laugh that she recognized immediately. "Rachel, honey," Derek called out, his voice carrying through the apartment with false warmth. "Come say hello. We have a guest." Rachel set down her tea and walked to the foyer, her heart already sinking with the certainty of what she was about to find. Madison Wells stood in the doorway, a designer overnight bag in one hand and a triumphant smile on her face. She was wearing a silk blouse and tailored pants that probably cost more than Rachel's entire maternity wardrobe. "Madison is going to be staying in the guest room for a while," Derek said, not bothering to meet Rachel's eyes. "She is helping with a project, and it makes more sense for her to be close by." Rachel felt the words like a physical blow. "A project," she repeated flatly. "Yes." Derek's voice had the patient tone of someone explaining something obvious to a slow child. "A business project. You know how these things are. Long hours, lots of late nights. Having Madison stay here will be much more efficient than her commuting back and forth." Rachel looked at Madison, who was making absolutely no effort to hide her satisfaction. "How convenient," Rachel said. "Is there a problem?" Derek asked, finally meeting her eyes with a challenge in his gaze. "This is my home. I can invite whoever I want to stay here. Our home," Rachel corrected quietly. "The home where we were supposed to raise our child together." Madison laughed, a bright, cruel sound. "Oh, sweetie. Derek told me you could be dramatic, but this is really something. I am here for work, nothing more, though I suppose I understand why you might be paranoid." She let her eyes travel deliberately over Rachel's pregnant body. "Women in your condition often have trouble thinking clearly." Derek picked up Madison's bag and headed toward the guest room. "I will help you get settled. Rachel, why do not you make some lunch? Madison has had a long morning." He did not wait for Rachel to respond. He just walked away, Madison following close behind, their shoulders almost touching as they disappeared down the hall. Rachel stood in the foyer of her own home, her hands trembling, her heart racing, and realized that the war she had been preparing for had just begun. What followed was 2 weeks of systematic psychological torture. Madison did not even pretend to be a professional colleague. She treated the penthouse like her own home, rearranging furniture, criticizing Rachel's decorating choices, using Rachel's favorite coffee mug every single morning. She called Rachel the help in front of the household staff. She made comments about Rachel's appearance, her cooking, her parenting preparations. She left lingerie in the bathroom, where Rachel would be sure to find it, then acted innocent when confronted. Derek joined in the cruelty with enthusiasm. He compared Rachel and Madison openly, always to Rachel's disadvantage. "Madison actually understands business," he would say at dinner, while Rachel sat at her own table, feeling like an unwanted guest. You should take notes, or Madison has such excellent taste. Maybe she can help you pick out something that actually flatters your figure. For after the baby, of course. Victoria visited daily, coaching Madison on how to run a proper household, discussing menus and schedules and social calendars as if Rachel had already been erased from the picture. The three of them would sit in the living room, drinking wine and discussing plans for the future. Plans that never included Rachel. Plans that assumed she would simply disappear once she was no longer useful. Rachel found herself confined to smaller and smaller spaces in her own home. Her bedroom. The nursery she had been preparing for their daughter. The corners of rooms where she could exist without being noticed. She felt herself shrinking, becoming less visible, less present, less real with each passing day. But Rachel Carter was not just a pregnant woman being tormented by her husband and his mistress. She was a federal prosecutor, and prosecutors did not break. During those 2 weeks, while Madison and Derek thought she was too defeated to fight back, Rachel was working. Every insult documented in her hidden journal. Every financial transfer between Derek's accounts and Madison's traced and recorded. Every conversation she could overhear, captured by the monitoring software she had installed months ago. She was building 2 cases now. The federal case against Derek's criminal empire, enriched by new evidence of the consulting fees he was paying Madison that were obviously just payments for her participation in an affair, and a divorce case so devastating that Derek would never recover from it. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening. Rachel was walking from the kitchen to her bedroom, carrying a glass of water and trying to ignore the constant heartburn that plagued her 3rd trimester. The hallway was dim, lit only by the evening light filtering through distant windows. Madison stepped out of the guest room directly into Rachel's path. For a moment, they just looked at each other. 2 women who both knew exactly what was happening and who refused to pretend otherwise. "Excuse me," Rachel said quietly. Madison did not move. "You know," Madison said conversationally, "Derek and I were talking last night about what is going to happen after the baby is born." Rachel felt her jaw tighten, but kept her voice even. "Were you—" "He is planning to file for divorce right after you recover from delivery. He has a whole timeline worked out. 6 months of letting you bond with the baby, just long enough that losing custody will hurt as much as possible. Then the divorce filing. Then the custody battle. Then," Madison smiled, "me moving in permanently." Rachel's hands clenched around her water glass. "Thank you for sharing his plans. I just want you to know what is coming," Madison continued, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "So you can start preparing. Maybe reach out to some lawyers, although Derek has already retained the best ones in the city. Maybe start looking for apartments, although I doubt you will be able to afford much without his money." She leaned closer, her perfume cloying and overwhelming. "Or maybe," Madison whispered, "you could just save everyone the trouble and leave now. Take whatever you can carry and disappear. Start over somewhere else. Because I promise you, Rachel, if you try to fight us, we will destroy you. Derek has the money, the connections, the power. You have nothing." Rachel looked into Madison's eyes and saw nothing but cruelty and calculation. "I appreciate your concern," Rachel said carefully, "but I think I will take my chances." Madison's expression flickered with irritation at Rachel's refusal to break. "Suit yourself," she said, "but remember, I tried to warn you." Then her foot shot out. A deliberate trip. Rachel stumbled forward, her arms windmilling, as she tried to protect both her belly and break her fall. She crashed into the hall table, her wrist twisting painfully as she caught herself, her glass shattering on the hardwood floor. She did not fall completely. She managed to stay on her feet, managed to protect her baby from the impact, but her wrist screamed with pain and her heart hammered with fear for the child inside her. Derek appeared in the hallway doorway, drawn by the noise. "What happened?" he asked, looking at Rachel clutching her wrist, at the broken glass on the floor, at Madison standing innocently a few feet away. "She tripped," Madison said. "I tried to help her, but she's just stumbled into the table. Pregnancy makes women so clumsy." Derek's eyes moved from Madison to Rachel, and Rachel saw him make a choice. He chose to believe the woman who was sleeping with him over the woman who was carrying his child. "You should be more careful," Derek said to Rachel, his voice flat and unsympathetic. "These floors are slippery. I have told you to wear different shoes." Then he turned and walked back to wherever he had come from, leaving Rachel standing in the hallway with a throbbing wrist and broken glass at her feet. That night, alone in her bedroom with ice on her wrist, Rachel finally allowed herself to cry, not because of the physical pain, though that was considerable, not because of the humiliation, though that burned like acid in her chest, but because she realized, with terrible clarity, that she had spent 3 years married to a man who would watch his mistress attack his pregnant wife and blame the wife. She had files that could send him to prison. She had evidence of money laundering and tax evasion and fraud. But none of that could protect her baby from a father who saw them both as obstacles to be removed. 2 nights later, Rachel's body gave out. She woke at 2 in the morning with sharp pains ripping through her abdomen. The kind of pains that did not fade, that grew stronger with each passing minute. That meant something was terribly wrong. She called out for Derek, but he was not in the penthouse. Later, she would learn he had been with Madison at the Soho apartment. She called for an ambulance herself, managed to get dressed and down to the lobby before the paramedics arrived. At the hospital, the diagnosis was swift and terrifying. Early labor at 32 weeks, stress-induced. Her body had reached its breaking point, and now her daughter was trying to enter the world 8 weeks too soon. The doctors worked frantically to stop the contractions, pumping Rachel full of medications that made her dizzy and nauseous and desperate. "Please," she begged every nurse and doctor who came into her room. "Please save my baby. Please do not let her come too early." They managed to stop the labor. Barely. Rachel was placed on strict bed rest for the remainder of her pregnancy. No stress, no exertion, no emotional upheaval. The doctor who delivered the instructions clearly had no idea how impossible those requirements were given Rachel's home situation. She texted Derek from her hospital bed. "In hospital. Early labor. Baby is okay, but need you here." His response came 40 minutes later. "Busy with investors. Update me if anything important happens." Rachel stared at that text for a long time. If anything important happens. His wife was in the hospital. His baby had almost been born 2 months early, and he was too busy to come. She checked Madison's Instagram out of morbid curiosity. There was a news story posted 30 minutes ago. Madison and Derek at what was clearly an expensive restaurant, champagne glasses raised, the caption reading, "Celebrating with my favorite person." They were celebrating. While Rachel lay in a hospital bed fighting to keep her daughter alive, her husband and his mistress were drinking champagne and posting about it on social media. Rachel felt something fundamental shift inside her. For 3 years, she had been playing a long game, gathering evidence, building a case, waiting for the right moment to strike. The waiting was over. She reached for her phone and sent a text to Director Thompson. "Coming in. Have everything. Need extraction plan." His reply came in seconds. Where and when? They arranged a meeting for 3 weeks later, when Rachel's doctor would clear her to travel safely. In 3 weeks, Operation Silent Partner would be complete. In 3 weeks, Derek Mitchell would face justice. In 3 weeks, Rachel Carter would be free. She had no idea that in 3 weeks, everything she had worked for would collapse around her, and she would have to fight harder than she had ever fought in her life, not for justice, for her baby. The cafe was supposed to be safe, a small establishment in a town 40 minutes outside the city. No connection to Derek Mitchell or his associates. A place where Rachel could finally hand over 3 years of evidence and end her nightmare. She had driven herself against doctor's orders. 3 weeks of bed rest had done little to calm her nerves or heal her spirit, but it had given her baby enough time to reach 35 weeks, close enough to term that the doctors were no longer panicking. The evidence was stored on 3 encrypted drives, each one a backup of the others. She had also uploaded everything to 2 secure cloud servers, using protocols she had learned from the department's cybersecurity team. She was prepared for any contingency, or so she thought. Rachel walked into the cafe at exactly 2 in the afternoon, the agreed-upon time. She scanned the room, looking for Director Thompson's familiar gray hair and worried expression. Instead, she saw a man she did not recognize, dark suit, expensive briefcase, the kind of carefully neutral expression that lawyers cultivate to hide their true intentions. Then she saw the woman standing beside him, Brittany, her college roommate, her closest friend, the one she had listed as her emergency contact, the one she had confided in during her darkest moments over the past 3 years, Brittany, who had apparently been on Derek Mitchell's payroll for 18 months. "I am sorry, RH," Brittany said, not meeting her eyes. "He offered me enough money to disappear, to pay off my student loans, to start over somewhere new. You know how much debt I have. You know how desperate I have been." Rachel felt the world tilt beneath her feet. "How long?" she whispered. 18 months, Brittany admitted. "Since right after your wedding. He approached me at that charity thing, the one you invited me to. He said he was worried about you, that something seemed off. He said he just wanted to make sure you were okay." She finally looked up, and Rachel saw tears in her eyes. "I did not know what you were doing at first. I thought I was just reporting to a concerned husband. By the time I figured out the truth, I was already in too deep. He had recordings of me accepting money. He said if I tried to back out, he would destroy my career." Rachel opened her mouth to respond, but before she could speak, she heard a sound that made her blood freeze. Slow clapping, coming from behind her. She turned to find Derek Mitchell walking through the cafe door, his smile predatory, his eyes gleaming with triumph. "Did you really think I did not know?" he asked, each word a knife. "Victoria suspected you from the very beginning. She said something was wrong, and she was right. She is always right." He walked toward Rachel slowly, savoring every moment of her shock and fear. "We have been watching you watch us for over a year now. Every time you photographed a document, we knew. Every time you made copies of files, we knew. Every conversation you recorded, we recorded too." "That is not possible," Rachel whispered. "I was careful. I was so careful." "You were good," Derek admitted, stopping a few feet in front of her. "I will give you that. If you had been dealing with anyone else, you might have succeeded, but I have spent my entire adult life learning how to spot people who are not what they seem. It is how I have survived this long." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a phone. "All those clever recordings you made? We made copies. Every single one. And guess what, Rachel? That evidence you gathered without proper authorization? Completely inadmissible. You went off the books. Your own department cannot use any of it in court." Rachel felt her legs threaten to give out. He was right. The mission had never been officially sanctioned. She had been too arrogant, too confident that results would justify methods. "But I can use it," Derek continued, his smile widening. "I have recordings of a federal prosecutor conducting an illegal investigation. Entrapment, falsifying her identity to enter a marriage, conspiracy to violate my civil rights, He leaned closer, his breath warm against her ear. By the time my lawyers are done with you, Rachel, you will lose your badge. Your career will be over. Your reputation will be destroyed. And you will lose custody of our child. The courts are not kind to mothers who turn out to be federal agents running illegal operations. Rachel's hand went to her belt, bit her belly where her daughter was moving. Please, she said, hating the desperation in her voice. Whatever you want to do to me, fine, but do not take my baby. She is innocent in all of this. Derek laughed. And it was the cruelest sound Rachel had ever heard. Innocent? She is leverage, Rachel. She is the one thing I know you care about more than your precious career. And as long as I control access to her, I control you. He stepped back, adjusting his tie like he was preparing for a business meeting. Here is what is going to happen. You are going to disappear quietly. Sign over full custody. Walk away with nothing except your freedom, and maybe, just maybe, I will not report you to the Justice Department. And if I refuse, then I destroy you publicly. I hold a press conference and tell the whole world that my wife was actually a federal agent who married me under false pretenses. Your career ends. Your reputation ends. Every case you have ever prosecuted gets called into question. You will be lucky if you are not disbarred. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. And then I take our daughter anyway. But instead of you getting to disappear quietly, you will spend the rest of your life knowing that everyone knows what you did. Every time you try to get a job, your name will come up in searches. Every time you try to have a relationship, your past will follow you. Derek smiled, and Rachel saw genuine pleasure in his cruelty. You have 48 hours to decide. I suggest you use them wisely. He turned and walked out of the cafe, his lawyer following close behind. Brittany hesitated, looking at Rachel with something that might have been guilt. I really am sorry, Brittany said quietly. Then she left too, and Rachel was alone. She sat in that cafe for 2 hours, unable to move. Everything she had built was gone. Her evidence was compromised. Her contacts were traitors. Her department would disavow her the moment Derek's lawyers started making noise. She had nothing left. No, that was not true. She had one thing left. Rachel looked down at her belly, where her daughter was kicking. I am sorry, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. I am so sorry. I tried to be a hero, and I just made everything worse. I tried to bring down a monster, and I became his victim instead. She sat there for another hour, crying, grieving for the life she had thought she could have. Then she straightened her spine, wiped her eyes, and walked out of the cafe. Because Rachel Carter might have lost everything. But she still had 48 hours. And in 48 hours, a lot could change. Rachel was ready to surrender. She had spent 36 of her 48 hours drafting the custody agreement, preparing to sign away her rights to her daughter. Every other option had been eliminated. Fighting Derek in court would destroy her publicly and professionally. Running would make her a fugitive and prove every accusation Derek planned to make. Staying and hoping for the best would leave her child in the hands of a monster. She had lost, completely and utterly lost. The document sat on her kitchen table, awaiting her signature. Derek's lawyer had messengered it over that morning, along with a note reminding her that the deadline was approaching. Rachel held a pen in her trembling hand, positioning it above the signature line. Then her phone rang. Unknown number. No caller ID. She almost let it go to voicemail. Almost continued signing away her daughter's future. Something made her answer. Do not sign anything. The voice was distorted, electronically altered to be unrecognizable. Not yet. Who is this? Rachel demanded. Someone who wants to see Derek Mitchell burn even more than you do. Someone he has hurt worse than he has hurt you, someone who has been waiting for exactly this opportunity. Rachel's heart began to race. What do you want? Check your email. I just sent you a gift, a very valuable gift. Review it. Understand what you are looking at, and then call me back at this number. Wait, Rachel said, but the line was already dead. She opened her laptop with trembling hands. A new email sat in her inbox. No sender name, no subject line. Just an attachment. She scanned it for viruses out of habit, then opened it. What she found made her heart stop. Financial records Derek thought he had permanently deleted 2 years ago. Transactions between his accounts and organizations that made his regular money laundering look like child's play. Communications with people who operated in shadows so deep that law enforcement did not even have names for them. Evidence of connections to genuinely dangerous organizations, not just white-collar criminals trying to hide their money, real criminals, the kind who made problems disappear permanently. And documentation of $14 million Derek owed to those organizations. Money he had borrowed to fund a deal that went wrong. Money he had been desperately trying to hide from people who did not accept excuses or payment plans. Rachel read through the files for 3 hours, her prosecutor's mind analyzing every detail, verifying connections, building a picture of what Derek Mitchell had really been involved in. When she was done, she understood 3 things. First, Derek was in far deeper trouble than even she had realized. The people he owed money to were not the kind who sued you in court. They were the kind who made you disappear. Second, this evidence had not come from her investigation. It had come from somewhere else entirely, which meant it was not tainted by her unauthorized methods. It could be used by any law enforcement agency in the country. And third, whoever had sent this to her had their own agenda. They wanted Derek destroyed, but not out of any sense of justice. They wanted him destroyed because he owed them money and they were tired of waiting. Rachel called the unknown number back. "Who are you?" she asked when the distorted voice answered. "That is not important. What is important is what you are going to do with what I sent you." "Why are you helping me?" "I am not helping you," the voice replied. "I am helping myself. Derek Mitchell owes my employers $14 million. He has been making excuses for 2 years. My employers are no longer interested in excuses. You want him destroyed. I want him exposed. I want his assets seized by the federal government. Because once his assets are seized, my employers can make a claim through certain channels. They will not get everything they're owed, but they will get something. And Derek Mitchell will get prison, which is better than what my employers originally planned for him." Rachel processed this information quickly. "You are offering me a deal. I am offering you a choice. Use this evidence to take Derek down through legal channels, and everyone gets something they want. You get your custody case, my employers get their money, and Derek gets what he deserves." The voice paused. "Or do not use it. Sign the custody agreement, lose your daughter, and my employers will handle Derek Mitchell their own way, which will be much messier for everyone involved." Rachel closed her eyes, weighing her options. She could use this evidence, turn it over to the FBI, claim she had received it anonymously. They would investigate. They would find more. Derek would go to prison, but she would also be accepting help from criminals, using evidence gathered through methods she did not want to think about. Was that who she wanted to be? Then she thought about her daughter, about what kind of life that little girl would have with Derek Mitchell as her father. And she made her choice. "Send me everything you have," she said into the phone. "Already done. Check your email again." There were 3 new files waiting, hundreds of pages of documentation, a roadmap to Derek Mitchell's complete destruction. "One more thing," the voice said. "There is a judge. Family court. Martha Coleman. She cannot be bought, cannot be intimidated. If you want to win your custody case, make sure it lands on her docket. How do I do that? That is your problem. I have given you the weapons. What you do with them is up to you. The line went dead. Rachel sat in the silence of her kitchen, looking at the custody agreement she had almost signed. Then she picked it up and tore it in half. She was not done fighting, not even close. Judge Martha Coleman had been Rachel's mentor in law school 15 years ago. She was known throughout the New York legal community as a judge who could not be bribed, threatened, or influenced. She also happened to owe Rachel a favor. Rachel made a phone call. "Martha," she said when the judge answered, "I need advice, off the record." "Rachel Carter? I thought you were on leave." "I was. I am. But I have gotten into a situation and I do not know who else to turn to." She told Martha everything: the undercover operation, the marriage, the pregnancy, Derek's threats, the evidence she had received from an anonymous source. Martha listened in silence. When Rachel was done, the judge was quiet for a long moment. "You went too far, Rachel," Martha finally said. "You know that. Your methods were illegal, your mission was unauthorized, and you have compromised yourself professionally and personally." "I know," Rachel whispered, "but that does not mean you have to lose your child to a criminal." Martha's voice shifted, becoming businesslike and practical. "Here's what you are going to do. Forget about your federal case. Forget about being a prosecutor. Right now, you are a mother trying to protect your child. That is all that matters. What about the evidence? The anonymous evidence can go to the FBI through proper channels. You received it unsolicited. You have an obligation to report potential criminal activity. That is not illegal. That is being a good citizen. In the custody case, you build it from scratch, not as a prosecutor, as a wife and mother who has been emotionally abused by her husband. You document everything using legal methods, time-stamped journal entries in your own handwriting, photographs with metadata, witness statements from people who have seen how he treats you. Rachel felt hope flickering in her chest. Can that be enough? In family court, you do not need beyond reasonable doubt. You need best interest of the child. And I can tell you from 20 years on the bench that judges do not look kindly on husbands who bring their mistresses to live in the family home while their wives are pregnant. Martha paused. Start today. Document everything. And Rachel, find yourself a good family law attorney. Someone who is not afraid of Derek Mitchell's money or connections. Do you know someone? I know several someones. I will send you a list. Rachel closed her eyes, tears of relief streaming down her face. Thank you, Martha. Do not thank me yet. You have a long fight ahead of you, but you are one of the strongest people I have ever known. If anyone can survive this, it is you. When Rachel hung up the phone, she felt like a different person. Not a defeated woman signing away her rights, a mother preparing for war. Over the next 2 weeks, Rachel followed Martha's guidance meticulously. She documented every cruel word Derek spoke. She photographed every bruise from Madison's continuing harassment. She gathered statements from household staff who had witnessed things they were not supposed to see. She also submitted the anonymous financial evidence to the FBI through their public tip line, identifying herself only as a concerned citizen who had received disturbing documents in the mail. When she was ready, she presented Derek with new terms. Joint custody, 50-50 split of all visible assets, a quiet divorce with no public accusations or counter-accusations. Derek studied the documents his lawyers had prepared, clearly surprised by Rachel's sudden backbone. "You have been busy," he said. "I have been thinking," Rachel replied calmly, "about what is best for our daughter. And what is best is parents who can coexist peacefully. This agreement gives us both what we want." Derek was suspicious, but the terms were reasonable enough that his lawyers advised him to accept. He still had his secrets protected. He still had his reputation intact. And he would still have access to his child. Fine, he said, signing the documents. We have a deal. Rachel thought she had won, not completely, but enough to protect herself and her baby. Then, on the night before the divorce was supposed to be finalized, Madison announced that she was pregnant, Derek's baby. Rachel watched her husband's face transform as the news sank in. She saw the calculations happening behind his eyes. 2 children, one with Rachel, tainted by the mess of their relationship, one with Madison, born into a clean slate, 2 potential heirs, 2 potential bargaining chips, 2 potential weapons. Derek tore up the custody agreement in front of Rachel. I changed my mind, he said, smiling. Madison is giving me what you never could: loyalty, enthusiasm, a fresh start. We had a deal, Rachel said, her voice cracking. Deals change. I am filing for primary custody tomorrow morning, and with everything my lawyers have on your little undercover adventure, I do not think any judge in this state is going to side with you. He walked toward the door, then paused. You should have signed when you had the chance, Rachel. Now you get nothing. Rachel stood in the ruins of her carefully constructed counterattack, watching 3 years of work and 2 weeks of hope crumble into dust. She had been so close to protecting her daughter, and now it was all gone, again. Rachel did not cry this time. She did not beg or plead or negotiate. She simply nodded and walked away while Derek and Madison celebrated their victory with champagne. They thought she was broken. They were wrong. That night, Rachel made a phone call to the distorted voice who had sent her the anonymous evidence. The information you sent me, she said. There are people who want it, are there not? People Derek owes money to. People he has been avoiding. The voice paused before responding. He owes my employers $14 million. They have been looking for leverage for quite some time. What happens if they get it directly? If someone were to tell them exactly where Derek's hidden assets are located? Another pause. Then Derek Mitchell becomes our problem, not yours. And we solve our problems very efficiently. Rachel closed her eyes. She knew what she was considering. She knew what it would mean. What about collateral damage? Madison, Victoria, people who are guilty of being terrible, but not necessarily guilty of anything criminal. There is always collateral damage in these situations. Rachel thought about her daughter, about the kind of mother she wanted to be, about the lines she had already crossed, and the lines she was about to cross. No, she said finally, I will not become him. There has to be another way. She hung up before the voice could respond. If Rachel Carter was going to destroy Derek Mitchell, she was going to do it legally, properly, in a way that she could live with for the rest of her life. The next morning, she submitted everything she had received from the anonymous source directly to the FBI, not through the tip line this time, through an agent she had worked with years ago, someone she trusted, someone who would actually investigate. I received these documents anonymously, she told Agent Patricia Morrison. I believe they contain evidence of serious federal crimes. I am submitting them as a private citizen with no connection to any ongoing investigation. Agent Morrison reviewed the documents for 3 hours while Rachel waited. These are explosive, Morrison finally said. If they are authentic, Derek Mitchell is looking at 30 years minimum. I believe they are authentic, Rachel replied. I also believe there may be more where they came from. He has been running this operation for at least a decade. We will investigate. But Rachel, you should know that even if we build a case, it will take months, maybe years. These things move slowly. I understand, Rachel said. I just need you to move fast enough to protect my daughter. 2 days later, the FBI opened an official investigation into Derek Mitchell. A federal judge issued a protective order. Rachel and her unborn child were placed under official protection until the investigation was complete. Derek was prohibited from contacting her. His assets were frozen pending review. His lawyers were scrambling to understand how everything had fallen apart so quickly. Rachel went into labor 3 days later. Emma Rose Carter was born at 7 pounds, 4 ounces, after 16 hours of labor. She was healthy and beautiful and perfect, with her mother's eyes and, unfortunately, her father's chin. Rachel held her daughter for the first time, U.S. Marshals standing guard outside her hospital room door, and cried, "I am going to protect you," she whispered to Emma. "No matter what it takes, no matter what I have to do, you are going to have a good life, I promise." For 72 hours, Rachel allowed herself to believe it was over. She had won. Derek was under investigation. Her daughter was safe. The nightmare was finally ending. Then the FBI investigation was quashed. She learned about it from Agent Morrison, who called with barely concealed fury in her voice. "Orders came from above," Morrison said. "The investigation has been reassigned pending review. That is code for buried. Someone with serious pull made some calls." Rachel felt ice spreading through her veins. Who? I do not know. But whoever it is has connections at the highest levels. Senator, maybe. Or someone in the deputy director's office. Derek had bought someone. Of course he had. He had been buying people for years. What about the protective order? Dissolved this morning? Morrison said quietly, "Rachel, I am sorry. I did everything I could." Rachel hung up the phone and stared at her sleeping daughter. The nightmare was not over. It was just beginning. Derek filed an emergency custody motion the next day. His lawyers cited Rachel's documented mental instability and her involvement in unauthorized federal activities. He had witnesses prepared to testify that Rachel had been exhibiting paranoid behavior throughout her pregnancy. A psychiatrist who had never met her but was willing to diagnose her based on secondhand accounts. Documentation of her unauthorized undercover operation. The hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks from now. In 2 weeks, Derek Mitchell was going to try to take her baby. Rachel lay in her hospital bed, her newborn daughter asleep in her arms, and felt the walls closing in. She had tried everything: legal channels, illegal channels, official authorities, anonymous sources. Nothing had worked. Derek had too much money, too many connections, too much power. Then her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Courthouse, Thursday, 2 p.m. Bring everything, including the hospital security footage." Rachel frowned. What hospital security footage? She pulled up the security footage from the night Emma was born on her laptop. At first, she did not see anything unusual. Then she noticed a figure in the corner of the frame. Someone entering her room while she was sedated after delivery. Derek. He was going through her personal belongings, photographing pages from her journal, copying files from her laptop, and there, in clear view of the camera, was Derek's lawyer handing him an envelope. An envelope that clearly contained cash. They had been planning to bribe someone at the hospital, to alter her medical records, to create evidence of mental instability that did not exist. And they had done it all on camera. Rachel smiled for the first time in weeks. She finally had a weapon they did not know about. The Family Court of New York was a gray building in Lower Manhattan, designed to process human misery with maximum efficiency. Rachel arrived 2 hours early, her 2-week-old daughter sleeping in a carrier against her chest. She was exhausted. She was still recovering from childbirth. She had not slept more than 3 hours at a stretch since Emma was born, but she was ready. Derek arrived 15 minutes before the hearing was scheduled to begin. He brought an entourage, 3 lawyers in expensive suits, a psychiatrist with a leather briefcase full of fabricated diagnoses, and a stack of documents designed to prove that Rachel was too unstable to raise her own child. He also brought Madison, who was now visibly pregnant, and clearly intended to demonstrate that Derek had a stable family waiting to embrace his daughter. Victoria was there too, seated in the gallery like a queen observing the execution of a rival. The judge assigned to the case was Martha Coleman. Rachel did not know how that had happened. She had not pulled any strings or made any calls. Perhaps Martha had arranged it herself. Perhaps it was simply luck. Either way, Rachel knew she had a fair shot. Derek's lead counsel opened with a devastating summary of Rachel's supposed crimes. Your Honor, my client's wife is a federal agent who conducted an illegal, undercover operation that involved marrying him under false pretenses. She violated his civil rights, invaded his privacy, and has demonstrated persistent paranoid ideation throughout their marriage. The lawyer held up a thick folder. I have documentation from mental health professionals indicating that Mr. Carter has exhibited signs of severe paranoia, delusions of persecution, and an inability to distinguish fantasy from reality. For the safety of his daughter, my client requests primary custody. Judge Coleman listened impassively, then turned to Rachel. Ms. Carter, I understand you are representing yourself. Do you wish to respond? Rachel stood slowly, careful not to wake Emma. Your Honor, everything opposing counsel just said is technically accurate. I did conduct an investigation into Derek Mitchell. I did marry him as part of that investigation. I did make mistakes. Serious mistakes that I am fully prepared to answer for. She paused, letting the admission hang in the air. But I also did something else. I documented 3 years of criminal activity. I witnessed my husband's mistress physically assault me while I was pregnant. I recorded my husband planning to manufacture mental health evidence to steal custody of my child. Rachel reached into her bag and pulled out a folder of her own. I have journal entries documenting every incident of emotional abuse. I have photographs of bruises. I have witness statements from household staff who saw what was happening. I have financial records showing that my husband has been laundering money for over a decade. Derek shifted uncomfortably in his seat. And I have this, Rachel continued, security footage from the hospital where I gave birth. She handed a flash drive to the bailiff, who connected it to the courtroom's display system. The footage began playing. Derek entering Rachel's room while she was sedated. Derek going through her belongings. Derek's lawyer handing him an envelope of cash. The courtroom went silent. What you are watching, Rachel said, is my husband and his attorney attempting to bribe hospital staff to alter my medical records. They were planning to create false documentation of mental instability that could be used against me in exactly this proceeding. Derek's face went white. His lawyers huddled together, whispering furiously. Rachel continued. The security cameras at that hospital were installed 2 years ago after a theft incident. Every inch of the maternity ward is recorded. My husband forgot about those cameras. He thought he could do whatever he wanted without consequences. She turned to look at Derek directly. He was wrong. Judge Coleman held up her hand for silence. Mr. Mitchell, do you wish to respond to this evidence? Derek's lead lawyer stood, visibly rattled. Your Honor, we would request a recess to review this footage and prepare an appropriate response. Denied, Judge Coleman said flatly. This is an emergency custody hearing. The welfare of a 2-week-old child is at stake. You can review the footage while I hear from any other witnesses Ms. Carter wishes to present. Rachel took a deep breath. Your Honor, I would like to call Madison Wells to the stand. Madison looked up, startled. Her eyes darted to Derek, who gave a small shake of his head. Madison does not have to testify, Derek's lawyer interjected. She is not a party to this proceeding. Actually, Rachel said, Ms. Wells is relevant to the custody determination. She is currently living in my husband's home, pregnant with his child, and will presumably be involved in raising my daughter if custody is awarded to him. Judge Coleman nodded. Ms. Wells, please take the stand. Madison walked to the witness box like she was approaching a firing squad. Ms. Wells, Rachel began, how long have you been in a relationship with my husband? Madison glanced at Derek, then at the judge. I do not see how that is relevant. Please answer the question, Judge Coleman instructed. About 8 months, Madison admitted. And during those 8 months, did you ever witness any interactions between Mr. Mitchell and myself? Madison hesitated. I saw some things. Can you describe what you saw? Madison's jaw tightened. I saw you being dramatic and difficult. I saw you trying to manipulate Derek with your pregnancy. Rachel nodded. Did you ever see me being physically aggressive toward anyone? No, Madison admitted reluctantly. Did you ever see me behaving in a way that seemed mentally unstable? Having delusions? Losing touch with reality? Madison was silent. Ms. Wells, Judge Coleman prompted. Please answer the question. No, Madison finally said. She was annoyingly calm, actually. No matter what we said to her. Rachel let that answer hang in the air for a moment. One more question. Did you ever deliberately trip me or push me while I was pregnant? Madison's face flushed red. That was an accident. I already explained that. So you did make physical contact with me while I was pregnant? I did not trip you on purpose. Rachel turned to the judge. Your Honor, I have security footage from my husband's penthouse showing Ms. Wells deliberately placing her foot in my path and causing me to fall. I also have medical records documenting a wrist injury from that fall and hospital records from 2 days later when I went into early labor due to stress. She held up another flash drive. The penthouse has extensive security cameras installed by my husband because he was paranoid about theft. He forgot that those cameras recorded his mistress assaulting his pregnant wife. The footage played on the courtroom screen. Madison's foot shooting out, Rachel stumbling, Derek's voice saying, "You should be more careful." Judge Coleman watched the footage twice, her expression unreadable. Then she turned to Derek. Mr. Mitchell, is there anything you wish to say before I render my decision? Derek stood, his composure cracking for the first time. Your Honor, whatever mistakes may have been made, I am this child's father. I have the financial resources to provide for her. I have a stable home, a support system, a future planned. Judge Coleman cut him off. Mr. Mitchell, I have seen enough. I have watched you attempt to bribe hospital staff. I have watched your mistress assault your pregnant wife. I have reviewed evidence suggesting that you have been manufacturing false mental health documentation. She leaned forward. And now you stand before me, claiming to be a fit parent? Your Honor, Derek's lawyer interrupted. Sit down, Judge Coleman commanded. I am ruling. The courtroom fell silent. Temporary full custody is awarded to Ms. Carter. Mr. Mitchell is ordered to have no contact with the child pending a full investigation. I am also referring this case to federal authorities with a recommendation for immediate action. She fixed Derek with a cold stare. Whatever crimes Ms. Carter may have committed in the course of her investigation, Mr. Mitchell, they pale in comparison to what I have seen today. You are not a fit father, and I will do everything in my power to ensure that your daughter is protected from you. Court is adjourned. Rachel stood in the courtroom as Derek was led away by security, as Madison fled through a side door, as Victoria sat in stunned silence. She had won, against all odds, against everything Derek had thrown at her, she had won. Emma stirred against her chest, and Rachel looked down at her daughter. I told you, she whispered. I told you I would protect you. For the first time in 3 years, Rachel Carter was free. 6 months after the custody hearing, Derek Mitchell stood in federal court for sentencing. The investigation Rachel had triggered had uncovered far more than anyone expected: money laundering, tax evasion, wire fraud, bribery of public officials, connections to organized crime. The list of charges filled 12 pages. The prosecution had taken less than 4 months to build their case using the anonymous evidence Rachel had provided as a starting point and uncovering dozens of additional crimes through their investigation. Derek's expensive lawyers had tried every trick in the book: motions to suppress evidence, claims of prosecutorial misconduct, arguments that his civil rights had been violated. None of it worked. The jury deliberated for less than 6 hours before returning guilty verdicts on 47 counts. Now it was time for sentencing. Rachel sat in the gallery of the federal courthouse, Emma asleep in her carrier. She had not spoken to Derek since the custody hearing. She did not want to. She just wanted to watch. Victoria Mitchell sat on the opposite side of the gallery. She had not spoken to her son since the evidence became public. The Mitchell family name, which she had spent her entire life protecting, was now synonymous with corruption and crime. Madison Wells was notably absent. She had given birth to a son 2 months ago and was currently cooperating with federal investigators in exchange for immunity. She had turned over everything she knew about Derek's operations, including records she had been keeping for her own protection. It turned out Madison had never been a devoted mistress. She had been a forensic accountant, planted by the people Derek owed $14 million. Her job was to get close to him, gather evidence of his hidden assets, and report back. Somewhere along the way, watching Rachel endure everything, Madison had decided to switch sides. Derek Mitchell was going to prison partly because the mistress he had used to torment his wife had been working against him the entire time. Rachel found a certain poetic justice in that. The judge, a stern man named Robert Harrison, who had presided over federal cases for 30 years, addressed Derek directly. "Mr. Mitchell, you have been convicted of 47 federal charges. These are not victimless crimes. Your money laundering enabled drug traffickers and human smugglers. Your tax evasion deprived the government of millions that could have funded schools and hospitals. Your bribery corrupted public officials and undermined faith in our institutions." Judge Harrison paused. "And beyond your crimes against society, you committed crimes against your own family. You tormented your pregnant wife. You brought your mistress into your home to humiliate her. You attempted to manufacture false evidence to steal custody of your own child." He shook his head. "I have been on this bench for 3 decades, Mr. Mitchell. I have sentenced murderers and terrorists and the worst criminals this country has to offer. But I have rarely seen someone so completely devoid of conscience as you appear to be." Derek stood motionless, his face blank. "I hereby sentence you to 34 years in federal prison," Judge Harrison announced. "You will be 68 years old before you are eligible for parole." He banged his gavel. "Court is adjourned." Rachel watched as the bailiffs led Derek away. For just a moment, his eyes met hers. She saw hatred there, and rage, and something that might have been despair. But she also saw something she had never seen before: fear. The man who had called her weak, who had said she had no power, who had promised to destroy her completely, was now the one who was powerless. Rachel did not smile. She did not gloat. She just watched him disappear through the door, watched it close behind him, and felt something heavy lift from her shoulders. It was over. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, shouting questions about the case, about Rachel's undercover investigation, about what came next. Rachel ignored them all. She held Emma close and walked to the car that was waiting for her. She had a life to rebuild, a daughter to raise, a future to create, and she was finally free to do it. Victoria Mitchell testified against her son during the trial in exchange for immunity from prosecution. She had known about Derek's crimes for years, had helped cover them up, had protected him from consequences his entire life. In the end, faced with prison herself, she chose self-preservation over maternal loyalty. After the trial, Victoria donated what remained of her fortune to domestic violence organizations. She sold the family mansion and moved to a small apartment in Connecticut. She sent birthday cards to Emma every year, cards that Rachel never opened. Some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt. But Rachel respected that Victoria had finally chosen truth over loyalty, even if it came too late. Madison Wells entered witness protection with her son Nathan. She had cooperated fully with investigators, providing evidence that strengthened the case significantly. In exchange, she received a new identity and a fresh start, far from anyone who might want revenge. She sent Rachel a letter before she disappeared. "I know you have no reason to trust me or believe me," Madison wrote, "but I want you to know that I am sorry, not because I got caught, but because I watched what I was doing to you, and I told myself it did not matter, because you were the enemy. You were never the enemy. You were just a woman trying to survive. And I made your survival harder because I wanted things I did not deserve. I hope you and Emma have a good life. You deserve it." Rachel read the letter twice, then burned it. She was not ready to forgive Madison. She might never be. But she understood, in some small way, how someone could get caught up in Derek Mitchell's orbit and lose sight of right and wrong. After all, Rachel herself had spent 3 years married to him. Brittany, Rachel's former friend, who had betrayed her, was charged with obstruction of justice. She received 3 years probation and mandatory community service. Her law license was suspended indefinitely. She tried to contact Rachel several times after the trial. Rachel never responded. Some betrayals cannot be forgiven. Some friendships cannot survive what was done to them. And Rachel had more important things to focus on than the people who had hurt her in the past. She had a future to build. 3 years after Derek Mitchell's sentencing, Rachel Carter sat on the porch of her new house, watching her daughter play in the yard. The house was modest by the standards Rachel had grown accustomed to during her marriage, a 3-bedroom colonial in a quiet Connecticut suburb. White shutters, a red front door, a backyard big enough for a swing set, and a small garden. It was not a Manhattan penthouse. It did not have imported Italian marble or floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the skyline. But it was hers. Every inch of it. Paid for with money she had earned herself. Decorated with furniture she had chosen herself, filled with memories that were genuinely happy. "Mama, look!" Emma shouted from the yard, her dark hair flying behind her as she chased a butterfly. "A yellow one. It is so pretty." "I see it, baby." Rachel smiled, her coffee warming her hands in the early autumn chill. "Do not chase it too far. Stay where I can see you." "I will, Mama." Emma was 3.5 now, a bundle of energy and curiosity and stubbornness that reminded Rachel painfully of Derek sometimes, though she tried not to dwell on it. Her daughter was not her father. Emma would have every opportunity to become someone good, someone kind, someone who used her strength to help others rather than hurt them. That was what Rachel worked for every single day. After the trial, Rachel had been offered her old job back at the Department of Justice. Director Thompson had called personally, assuring her that despite her unauthorized methods, she had done more to fight organized crime than any agent in recent memory. Rachel had declined. "I crossed too many lines," she told him. "I compromised myself professionally and personally. Even if you are willing to look past that, I am not. I need to build something new, something I can be proud of." Thompson had understood. He had even provided a reference when Rachel applied for her law license in Connecticut. Carter Family Law opened its doors 18 months after the trial. A small office in downtown Hartford, 2 paralegals, 1 associate attorney, and Rachel herself, taking cases that no one else would touch. Custody battles where the mother was being outspent and outmaneuvered by a wealthy husband. Divorce proceedings where evidence of abuse had mysteriously disappeared. Situations where the system seemed designed to crush the vulnerable and protect the powerful. Rachel knew those situations intimately. She had lived them. And now she spent every day fighting to make sure other women did not have to face them alone. Her first piece of advice to every new client was always the same. Start documenting today, not tomorrow. Today. A journal no one knows about. Photos with timestamps, screenshots with dates. By the time you need evidence, you will wish you had started gathering it earlier. Find your people. A lawyer who believes you. A friend who cannot be bought. Someone who will answer the phone at 2 in the morning when everything is falling apart. You cannot fight this battle alone. The system is broken. I will not pretend otherwise. But it is not completely closed. There are still judges who see the truth. There are still paths to justice. You just have to know where to look and be prepared to fight harder than you ever thought possible. In her first year, Rachel helped 47 women. In her second year, she trained other attorneys in her documentation methods. In her third year, she testified before the Connecticut legislature about reforms needed in the family court system. She was making a difference, 1 case at a time, 1 family at a time, 1 woman at a time. But the greatest change was not in her career. It was in her heart. The screen door opened behind her, and Marcus stepped onto the porch carrying 2 plates of pancakes. Marcus Johnson, 38 years old, firefighter, the kind of man who made Rachel feel safe in a way she had never experienced before. They had met at a charity event 2 years ago. Rachel had been speaking about domestic violence awareness. Marcus had been there, representing his firehouse, which sponsored the organization hosting the event. He had approached her afterward, not to ask for her phone number or compliment her appearance, but to ask how firefighters could better support abuse survivors they encountered on emergency calls. That was the moment Rachel knew he was different. Their relationship had developed slowly. Rachel was not ready to trust again, not after everything she had been through. Marcus was patient. He never pushed. He just showed up, day after day, proving through his actions that not all men were monsters. He was gentle with Emma, patient with Rachel's occasional flashbacks, and completely uninterested in anything resembling corporate finance. He made her laugh. He held her when she cried. He loved her without conditions or calculations. Rachel had not known that kind of love existed, not until she stopped looking for it. Pancakes are ready, Marcus announced, setting the plates on the porch table. Extra chocolate chips per special request. Emma came running at the mention of chocolate. Extra chocolate chips. You are the best, Marcus. I know, he said, grinning. That is why your mom keeps me around. Rachel rolled her eyes, but she was smiling, among other reasons. They ate breakfast together, the 3 of them, like a family, because that was what they were becoming. Slowly, carefully, in a way that Rachel was finally learning to trust. After breakfast, Marcus took Emma to the park, giving Rachel time to work on the case file waiting on her desk. Another custody battle. Another woman being told she was not good enough, not stable enough, not wealthy enough to raise her own children. Rachel was reviewing witness statements when her doorbell rang. She was not expecting anyone. Marcus had a key. Her clients always called ahead. She opened the door to find a woman standing on her porch, young, maybe mid-20s, pregnant, terrified. Her hands were trembling. Her eyes were red from crying. She wore long sleeves, despite the warmth of the September afternoon, the kind of long sleeves that concealed bruises. Rachel recognized this woman. Not her face, which she had never seen before, but her fear, her desperation, the look of someone who had reached the end of her rope and was clinging to the last strand. "Are you Rachel Carter?" the woman asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "The lawyer? I am." Rachel kept her voice gentle. "How can I help you?" The woman started crying. "My husband is a state senator," she said, the words tumbling out between sobs. "He is hurting me. He has been hurting me for 2 years, but he says no one will believe me. He says he owns the judges. He says I will never see my baby again if I try to leave." She looked at Rachel with eyes full of desperate hope. "I read about you online, about what you went through, about how you fought back and won. I thought maybe if anyone could help me, it would be you." Rachel felt the weight of this moment settle around her. 3 years ago, she had been exactly where this woman was standing, pregnant, terrified, facing a powerful man who believed he was untouchable. She had survived. She had won. She had built a new life from the ashes of the old one, but she had not done it alone. Martha Coleman had helped her. The anonymous source had helped her. Even Madison, in the end, had helped her. Now it was Rachel's turn to help someone else. "What is your name?" Rachel asked gently. "Jessica," the woman whispered. "Jessica Palmer." Rachel stepped aside, opening her door wide. "Come inside, Jessica. I am going to make you some tea, and then you are going to tell me everything. Every detail, every incident, every time he hurt you, and every time he made you feel like you could not fight back." She led Jessica into her home, into her practice, into the beginning of a fight that would change both their lives. "But what if he really does own the judges?" Jessica asked as they walked toward the kitchen. "What if no one believes me?" Rachel thought about her own journey, the 3 years of undercover work, the betrayal, the custody battle, the moment she thought all was lost, and the moment everything turned around. "Then we find judges he does not own," she said firmly, "and we build a case so solid that believing you is the only option. And we fight together, because you are not alone anymore." She stopped at the kitchen doorway and turned to face Jessica directly. "I know exactly what your husband says to you. I know the threats he makes. I know how powerful he seems, and how powerless you feel. I lived that nightmare for 3 years. But I also know something he does not want you to understand. Something it took me far too long to learn myself." "What is that?" Jessica asked, her voice trembling. Rachel smiled, the same smile she had worn walking out of that courtroom 3 years ago. The smile of a woman who had learned that her greatest strength was not in fighting alone, but in helping others fight. "You are not weak," she said. "You have never been weak. You have been surviving a situation that would destroy most people. And the fact that you found the courage to come here today, that you stood up, despite everything he has done, to break you down, that proves you are stronger than he could ever understand." Jessica's tears were flowing freely now, but there was something else in her eyes. Hope. Rachel put her arm around Jessica's shoulders and guided her toward the kitchen. "Come on," she said gently. "Let me tell you about a woman who thought she was powerless once, and what happened when she remembered she was not." If Rachel's story touched your heart today, if it reminded you of your own strength when you needed it most, then I have one small request. Hit that subscribe button right now. Not for us. For the next person who needs to hear this message. Every time you subscribe, our story reaches someone new. Someone who is sitting alone tonight, wondering if they are strong enough to survive. Someone who needs to know that they are not as powerless as they feel. Turn on that notification bell so you never miss a story that could change your life or help you change someone else's. And in the comments, I want to hear from you. Where are you watching from tonight? New York, California, Texas, London, Sydney, Lagos, Manila. This family stretches across every corner of the world, and your voice matters here. And if you have ever been told you were too weak to fight back, tell us. What is the strength they underestimated in you? What power did they never see coming? Share this video with someone who needs it. A friend going through a hard time, a family member facing impossible odds, a stranger on the internet who might find hope in Rachel's journey. Because stories like this are not meant to be kept to ourselves. They are meant to be shared. They are meant to heal. They are meant to remind us all that we are never as alone as we feel. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of this family. Thank you for believing in stories that matter. Final statement. And one last thing before you go. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually crafted by our team with one purpose in mind: to bring you stories that carry real meaning and lasting lessons. Every word was chosen intentionally. Every scene was built to resonate with your heart. Every character was created to reflect the struggles and triumphs of real people facing real challenges. We do not use shortcuts. We do not copy. We pour our hearts into every story because we believe you deserve content that respects your time and speaks to your soul. If you felt something today, if this story made you think or cry or hope, then we have done our job. And we will keep doing it, one story at a time, as long as you keep showing up. See you in the next one, family. The quietest person in the room might just be the one who changes everything.